Welcome to my Asshole Podcast. Let's get into it. Today is Thursday. And you know what we do on Thursday? We have our book today at Court of Thorns and Roses. And boy, is that book getting a little... Man, our boy Tamlin, he trying to get him some coochie. Man, and it is working. It seemed like it's working. Because when they went to the little lake thing and she was staring at man's, chest and everything, she was like, Jesus. She was like, Isaac could never. She was like, Isaac could never. That old shrimp skin over there, nah, bruh, he ain't it. This motherfucker, though, goddamn, he got it going on. And then he all in the water looking majestic and shit, and she's all up in the water too, like, damn, this water is warm, but it's inviting and it's good, like, woo, she ain't never experienced nothing like that. She like, damn, he bomb as hell and got the experiences to match it, like, hey, he trying to get some of that booty, man. And then you got the other guy, shit, I can't remember his name because he hasn't really been around too much. And it seems like, I don't know. I don't really get his character just yet. Maybe it's just because we haven't gotten too much interaction with him as we have with Tamlin. Because the other guy, it seems like he's more of the brooding kind of like self-loathing type where he's just always like I'm gonna make her fall in love with me by being afar and mysterious, and I'm just like, yo, goof, Tamlin about to steal your girl, bruh. What are you doing? And it doesn't seem like there's this love triangle going on, but then it does seem like there's this love triangle going on. And then our girl, she's trying hard not to be like, she's like, I don't want to be here, but then there's moments where she's just like, damn, I'm glad I'm here. I'm just saying, bro. But we are going to get into chapters 19 and 20 today. So hopefully you guys are ready for that. It's going to be juicy. I'm excited to see how this book continues on. We've gotten pretty far into it, man. I'm looking over and we're about 40% into the book, and it's starting to get pretty good, but I am excited to see how this book continues on, because it's a slow burn, man. Woo, this book is a slow burn. Goodness gracious. So before we do that, though, we always have a thread in the beginning. And today's thread, I think, is a bit of a good one. This thread is, what did you end up doing drunk? So let's see what you drunk motherfuckers have been doing out in these streets. All right. Drunk me always puts my wallet, keys, and my phone in my shoes by wherever I end up passing out. I see. This ain't this person's first rodeo. Yeah. They're like, okay, I am far too drunk. Let me get all my valuables. Let me shove them in my shoe and we Gucci. Because I ain't going to lose my shoe. Oh, but I sure will lose one of these 3 items. And I need them to get home. Man. That's how you know they've been around the block one or too many times. Had a conversation with 2 police officers and got a free ride home. No criminal record required. Still don't remember exactly what I said. That's funny. Yeah. They said no criminal record required. That's comedy, bro. Oh my God. And a lot of times I think if you're that fucked up, the cops would probably just take you home, just in the fact that, like, look, we don't need you out in the streets getting run over. We don't need you getting kidnapped. We don't need you driving, so let's handle this because yeah, better us than you. Laid in the back of a Ford Explorer to scare my friends before they went back to Illinois after a party. Well, I passed out and ended up in Illinois. Wow. That's crazy. My mans was just laying there and he was like, oh, I'm going to get them. Oh, I'm going to get them so good. They took a little too long. My guy passed out. He woke up in a whole new state. That's crazy, bruh. That is crazy. Oh, shit. Barkeeper was missing for 10 minutes, tried to get my own beer. I put the money on the counter, got kicked out, decided to walk home at 6 a.m., climbed the fence and went for a walk on the construction site, saw a bridge was demolished, was too lazy to walk 500 more meters for the next one, crossed the 20-meter wide river in full clothes, climbed another fence, finally home. It was winter. This man went on a whole damn journey just to get home. Bruh. Call a ride. Like, did you not have a phone on you? Like what the? I bet he woke up in the morning and was like, why am I soaking wet? I smell like a stank ass river. And my shoes are muddy to all hell. Like, what was I doing last night? Where did I go? Because damn, that is crazy. My man had a whole fucking adventure on his way home. That's crazy. Can't remember, but apparently I sat on a bench in someone's garden for about 1 to 3 a.m. contemplating life and feeling very ill. Oh man, been there. I ain't gonna cap to you. There was a time that me and a bunch of friends, we went out and we went to like college town. It's where all the, college people are throwing parties and it's like it looks just like a neighborhood, but it's just a bunch of like sorority and fraternity houses. We went there, got fucked up. I mean, fucked up to the point where like my boy, he was like damn near blacked out. So it took like 3 guys to carry his big ass. And then, and he's not big fat. He's big buff. So it's like, he's even heavier than he appears. And then he's just dead weight. So that was the worst. And then on top of that, I was sloshed and I'm like, fuck, dude. Nobody could drive. So we were like, damn, nobody's phone was charged because it was like 3 a.m. And so then we decided to sleep on somebody's lawn. And yeah, needless to say, the sprinklers woke us up. And that was tough. We went back to the hotel room soaking wet and with the worst hangover ever. And yes, I threw up in their lawn. And that was probably, oh my God, the worst thing ever. Oh, I felt so bad. I felt so bad for those people. I was thinking about it the whole time during breakfast. I was like, yo, dude, they're about to literally walk out of their house and being like, God damn it, somebody threw up in our yard. Oh, that is a night to remember, man. Oh, it's one of those things where it's like you read a story that's very similar to yours and then that story just pops up into your head and you're like, oh shit, I've been there and I've done that, where you just out in a stranger's lawn or you're just chilling somewhere and it's like, damn. What did my life come to? Like shit. All right, on to our next one. Fell through a glass table, puked on my bed, then slept on my front lawn. Hey, facts. He was like, well, I can't use the bed now. Like, shit. Like, okay, well, I might as well go outside and try to get some sleep. Like, what do you... Like, the couch didn't come to mind to him. He was like, the grass sounds amazing. Man. Like, bro... stood in the shower and tried to piss my pants. Still couldn't do it. What? So this man was so drunk, he was just like, shit, man, I gotta take a piss. And they're like, oh, bro. He's like, don't worry. He's like, no. He's like, I can't get my pants, dude. So I'm just going to stand in the shower and I'm going to pee my pants and then we're good. And then we'll go. And they're like, all right, dude. All right. He stood in the shower and was like, I can't do it. I can't pee, man. Like, what the fuck? Okay. All right, brother. Last night I was drunk. After dinner, I decided to clean my whole house. I guess I didn't want the fun to stop, but knew I needed to clean my house. Nice surprise this morning. What? I'm sorry, but if I'm drunk, man, I can't do manual labor. I want to lay down somewhere with a greasy food. I don't care what it is. I need greasy food. I need to lay down, and I need some water. Like, what the hell? There's no way I can get drunk and just come to mind like, you know what? Cleaning sounds fantastic right now. There's just no way. That's wild to me. Club DJ for a number of years, pretty much stayed drunk every night, tried not drinking one night, and the owner brought me one and said, you should keep drinking, so I did. Oh, gee, facts, like, there's a lot of you new listeners, so you probably don't know this, but I used to do music, and I used to do it on the road and travel back when I was younger, and you can look us up. All the Right Moves was the band's name, and we traveled to a numerous amount of places, and every time we went to places that had an open bar or anything like that, yeah, we were comped. They were like, hey, you guys can have drinks whenever you want. Like, they're the act, it's cool. And yes, there's a lot of times when you don't want to drink. It's just because you're in that environment, you're like, fuck it, why not? I hated so many nights when we would tour. It was so bad. I would sit there and I'm just like, dude, why did I drink last night? What the fuck was I doing? Well, you wake up just like, I will never do this again. Then the next night comes and guess what? You're drinking. And it's like, it was a perpetual cycle of like, man, fuck this, I'm never going to drink again, to, oh yeah, sure, I'll have another beer. Fuck, man, I'm never drinking again. Sure, man, I'll have another beer. It was awful, but you just get into that nightlife mode, and I think anybody who's ever either been in the nightlife industry, or you're in a band and you've toured, or you're a DJ and you play a lot of venues, or you're a musical act in general, whatever it is, that's just usually how it goes. You're just in that environment and you're like, fuck it. You forget completely what happened the previous time you got drunk and fucked up, and you're just like, what's one, and you're having such a good time, and you're like 4 in, and you're like, damn, I told myself I wasn't going to do this at 4 a.m., and you're just regretting life. Oh my God. Trust me. Been there, brother. Been there. This nigga said, talk to my ex. Facts. I've never done it, but boy, have I had friends do it. Oh God, I've had friends do it. And I'm like, what are you doing? I've had to like take people's phones sometimes. And I'm just like, nah, no. And they're like, come on, man, give me my phone. I'm like, no. Because I know you're going to text. I know what you're going to do. No. Facts. All right, it was a time around my semi-annual replaying of Ocarina of Time. And I'm always having a laugh about how funky the Gorgons are. Love these fellas. And so one night, one drunk night, while going out for some pizza with my pals, I curled up into a ball and rolled down the front hill of my apartment while yelling, no one can stop my wild rolling. Some concrete steps then stopped my wild rolling moments later, though it was a good laugh while it lasted. All right. I mean, she's a good time. I give her that. You're a good time. And you're very well cultured. I give you that too. Not just drunk, but went to a party and ended up on a different continent. Wait, what? On a different what? Okay. So, in Detroit, I went to a rave in a warehouse on the east side. Got talking about music with one of the DJ crowd. He asked if I wanted to go to his next gig. I say yes, thinking the usual next stop will be Chicago or whatever. One intoxicant leads to another, and I regain clarity in a private plane or whatever. What? Although conscious, I wasn't aware we flew to LAX and refueled. We land in Sydney and I have to go to the embassy with just my driver's license. The embassy staff know the guy. I'm apparently not the only American he's done this with. Partied that night and then went to his father's ranch for a few days. Partied in Melbourne and then flew to Chicago with one of his friends. Hitchhiked back to Detroit. perfect spring break. What in the hell? That is wild. I mean, for one, I'm glad you're alive. And two, I'm glad that, you were able to get back safely. Three, glad you had fun. But that is crazy. You went... How in the hell... Like, if you were conscious the whole time and you're getting on a plane... What? Low key, I kind of think you knew what was going on. All right, let's be honest. Low key, I think you knew what was going on the whole fucking time. That to me is just crazy. The fact that you got on a plane. You got on a plane, woman. Like, what the heck? All right. Hey, again, glad you got home safe. Glad you had fun. I'm glad nothing happened to you. But damn, that's wild. That's wild. That is a story for the ages. In college, it was usually having sex and waking up and not remembering it. Uh-oh. That's, that's a tough one there. Hopefully you kicked that habit. Jesus. Not drunk, but very altered on chocolate mescaline. At a rave in an old theater, talking to a cute blonde about tattoos, asked about the script on her ankle. She offered to demonstrate. Find empty theater seats in the upper level, get naked. I'm pounding away, holding her legs in the air, and realized it was her name in cursive. I mean... At least she got some coochie out of it. Shit. She was like, the only way you can read this is if you have my legs in the air. And I'd have been like, say less. Say less, baby girl. What are we talking about here? I mean, and it is kind of weird that she got a tattoo of her own name. I would think that's a little weird. I'd be like, what? What compelled you to get your own name tattooed on you? That's like people who get their own birthdays tattooed on them. I think that's weird, if I'm being honest with you. When they get, like the Roman numerals of their birthday tattooed on them, I think that's weird. Why? Now, if you're doing that for, like, your kid's birthday or, like, say your mom passed away or something and you get, like, their birthday and Roman numerals tattooed on you, okay, cool, that's understandable. But your birthday, I think, is weird. I really do. I'm like, why? Why the fuck would you do that? It is what it is, man. On to our next. Not exactly sure. Went to a friend's place for a work party with a tequila taster afterwards. It was there I learned, 1, the difference between tequila labels is subtle at best. 2, the alcohol content is so high that it becomes pointless to discern them after the second try. I had consumed the equivalent about 8 shots and took mass transit home. I remember getting on the train and blacking out. My next memory is waking up a few hours later face down in my own bed. According to the clock, enough time had transpired to account for a trip back home, but I have no idea what kind of drunken Mr. Magoo like meander adventure I took along the way home. What in the... Yo, that is kind of wild and kind of scary at the same time. The fact that all you remember is getting on a train and then you wake up in your bed, that is a little scary. Because, dude, imagine if, you like you did I cannot remember the name of that movie right now. Oh, I can't remember the name of that movie. Oh, The Hangover. There you go. Oh, imagine if you did something like The Hangover. You know what I mean? Where you just, instead of, you took the train somewhere, you may have went to a strip club, did some crazy shit, hopefully you didn't wake up with a tattoo. That would be crazy. Hopefully you didn't marry a stripper. You never know. Imagine he just remembers waking up in his bed and then he has like a missed call from some random girl. He's got a call from the FBI or something. They're just like, yo, can we, come get you for questioning about da 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 da? And you're like, wait, what? No. You got a cop car in your front yard or something. Like, bro, Imagine. That would be crazy. That's all I would be thinking, if I'm being honest with you. If I can just remember getting onto a train and then I wake up at home, I'd be like, what did I do? What did I do? I'd be looking around for shit. I'm like, please tell me I just got on the train and went home, because that's dangerous. All right. Let's see. One time I went to a party about a mile south of town in my country. The next morning I woke up in a field waterway 5 miles north of said town. I had my phone, wallet, Yeti cup, and the flashlight I never leave my house without. No one knows when I left the party. No one knows if I got picked up or just flat out walked. I ended up having to walk 6 miles back to the party to receive my vehicle and ask the other party goers if they knew when I had left. Damn, you had to walk 6 miles? Sheesh. At that point, I would have just went home. Like, girl, what? What? That is a little wild. I mean, at least she had all her gear with her. She said she had her phone, her wallet, her Yeti cup, and her flashlight. Like, she was ready. She was like, I know I'm about to get fucked up, and I'm going to get lost. So I'm going to make sure I have my emergency water with me. I'm going to make sure I have a flashlight, because bitch ain't getting lost in the dark. And I'm going to make sure I have all my shit, because I know me, and I'm going to get lost. Like, hey, at least she was prepared. Damn. That's crazy. All right, I'm going to do 2 more. So I wasn't drunk, as most of my shenanigans revolve around psychedelic inebriation as a teenager, but there's a church and cemetery, in Newtown, Sydney, Australia. A few friends of mine were on pink elephant tabs. I have no idea what that is, but I'm sure it's some kind of acid. Discovered that the church was unlocked. It was about 2 a.m. My friend runs in, and 15 minutes later runs out with a massive stuffed toy, runs into the light, and it's dead ass a pink elephant. We carried it around all night and saw several other pink elephants in the store windows on our journeys. Just one of those "did that really happen last night" moment. So you guys hallucinated together that there was a pink elephant running around with y'all. Yo, that's mad wild. That's mad wild. Like, there's getting fucked up, and then there's just getting outright smashed. That's crazy. And I get it, that acid must have been some crazy shit for you guys to be thinking there was a pink elephant. Like, what the fuck? I bet people were looking at them like, what are they on, and where can I get some? You know what I mean? Like, shit. That is wild. All right, this is going to be our last one for today. I broke up with my boyfriend at a campfire, got so drunk I fainted in the kitchen, and the only thing I remember is someone carrying me and asking me, "How much do you weigh?" I guess if she's a bigger girl, then that's like, ouch. Yeah, the night seemed to just get worse and worse for her. Jesus. And I mean, I guess the whole breaking up with your boyfriend, I guess, maybe that was your idea, so I wasn't that bad. But, then you get so fucked up, you pass out, and some random guy is just like, "Damn, girl, how much do you weigh?" And like, oh, okay, damn. You have to take shots like that? Like, shit. Okay, I mean, sounds like he got rough on there, But that's going to go ahead and be that thread, man. Hope you guys enjoyed that interesting thread. You guys be getting into some crazy shit when you're drunk and on hallucinogens out in these streets, man. Goodness gracious. You guys need to learn to stay home a little more. My God. But hey, do your thing. hopefully, nobody got hurt and everybody got home safe. It sounds like it, because, man, homegirl went all the way to Australia. Like, god damn. And then she hitchhiked home. Like, that was probably the craziest one to me, because I'm like, why would you get onto a plane? But hey, nonetheless, people are crazy when they're drunk and they do stupid shit. It is what it is. But hopefully you guys enjoyed that one, man. Let me know what you think about that one in the comments. If you have a drunk story of your own, please put it in the comments. I'd love to read it, man. Love to read it. But without further ado, I'm going to blast through these announcements. Then we're going to get into our book, A Court of Thorns and Roses, chapters 19 and 20. So, patreon.com/mythasshole podcast. Get an exclusive episode every single Friday. If you haven't seen last week's Friday episode, the free Patreon episode, go check that episode out. If you like what we're doing over here on the free episodes and you want a little bit more and you're like, I don't know, I want to see before I buy, I want to check it out before I buy, go ahead and check out that episode. It was Friday's episode, I believe April 2nd's episode, so go ahead and find that episode, man. I do have a playlist down in the description. You can find that episode really quick in that playlist. So it'll literally be the last link in there. Click that, click the newest episode or any of the episodes in there, and you can get a taste of what we do on Patreon, man, and check that out. If you're an audio listener, keep downloading the show as well as rating 5 stars. You guys have been showing a lot of support, and I love that so much. I've been seeing the download numbers go up and up and up and up and up, and I appreciate that so much. We are almost at my goal of 15,000 downloads, and I appreciate that so much. If you guys want to help out on the free 99 side of things, go ahead and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, as well as YouTube. I've been noticing the YouTube subscribers going up, and that's awesome. I appreciate that so much. Even if you don't even watch on YouTube, just hitting the subscribe button helps a lot. I do appreciate all the support. Love you guys all. Without further ado, though, let's get into our book for today, A Court of Thorns and Roses, chapters 19 and 20. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this a-crack-a-lackin'.
Chapter 19. The next morning, my paint and supplies arrived from wherever Tamlin or the servants had dug them up. But before Tamlin let me see them, he brought me down hall after hall until we were in a wing of the house I'd never been to, even in my nocturnal exploring. I knew where we were going without his having to say. The marble floors shone so brightly that they had to have been freshly mopped, and that rose-scented breeze floated in through the opened windows. All this, he'd done this for me, as if I would have cared about cobwebs or dust. When he paused before a set of wooden doors, the slight smile he gave me was enough to make me blurt, "Why do anything this kind?" The smile faltered.
"It's been a long time since there was anyone here who appreciated these things. I like seeing them used again."
Especially when there was such blood and death in every other part of his life. He opened the gallery doors, and the breath was knocked from me. The pale wooden floors gleamed in the clean, bright light pouring in from the windows. The room was empty, save for a few large chairs and benches for viewing the... I barely registered moving into the long gallery, one hand absent-mindedly wrapping around my throat as I looked up at the paintings. So many, so different, yet all arranged to flow together seamlessly. Such different views and snippets and angles of the world, pastorals, portraits, still lifes, each a story and an experience, each a voice shouting or whispering or singing about what that moment, that feeling had been like, each a cry into the void of time that they had been here, had existed. Some had been painted through eyes like mine, artists who saw in colors and shapes I understood. Some showcased colors I had not considered. These had a bend to the world that told me a different set of eyes had painted them. A portal into the mind of a creature so unlike me, and yet I looked at its work and understood and felt and cared.
I never knew, Tamlin said from behind me, that humans were capable of.
He trailed off as I turned, the hand I'd put on my throat sliding down to my chest, where my heart roared with a fierce sort of joy and grief and overwhelming humility. Humility before that magnificent art. He stood by the doors, head cocked in that animalistic way, the words still lost on his tongue. I wiped at my damp cheeks. It's perfect, wonderful, beyond my wildest imaginings didn't cover it. I kept my hand over my heart. "Thank you," I said. It was all I could find to show him what these paintings, to be allowed into this room, meant.
Come here whenever you want.
I smiled at him, hardly able to contain the brightness in my heart. His returning smile was tentative but shining, and then he left me to admire the gallery at my own leisure. I stayed for hours, stayed until I was drunk on the art, until I was dizzy with hunger and wandered out to find food. After lunch, Alice showed me to an empty room on the first floor with a table full of canvases of various sizes, brushes whose wooden handles gleamed in the perfect clear light, and paints. So many paints, beyond the 4 basic ones I'd hoped for, that the breath was knocked from me again. And when Alice was gone and the room was quiet and waiting and utterly mine, then I began to paint. Weeks passed, the days melting together. I painted and painted, most of it awful and useless. I never let anyone see it, no matter how much Tamlin prodded and Lucian smirked at my paint-splattered clothes. I never felt satisfied that my work matched the images burning in my mind. Often I painted from dawn until dusk, sometimes in that room, sometimes out in the garden. Occasionally I'd take a break to explore the spring lands with Tamlin as my guide, coming back with fresh ideas that had me leaping out of bed the next morning to sketch or scribble down the scenes or colors as I'd glimpsed them. But there were the days when Tamlin was called away to face the latest threat to his borders, and even painting couldn't distract me until he returned, covered in blood that wasn't his own, sometimes in his beast form, sometimes as the High Lord. He never gave me details, and I didn't presume to ask about them. His safe return was enough. Around the manor itself, there was no sign of creatures like the Naga or the bog, but I stayed well away from the western woods, even though I painted them often enough from memory. And though my dreams continued to be plagued by the deaths I'd witnessed, the deaths I'd caused, and that horrible pale woman ripping me to shreds, all watched over by a shadow I could never quite glimpse, I slowly stopped being so afraid. Stay with the High Lord, you will be safe. So I did. The spring court was a land of rolling green hills and lush forests and clear, bottomless lakes. Magic didn't just abound in the bumps and the hollows. It grew there. Try as I might to paint it, I could never capture it, the feel of it. So sometimes I dared to paint the High Lord, who rode at my side when we wandered his grounds on lazy days. The High Lord, whom I was happy to talk to or spend hours in comfortable silence with. It was probably the lulling of magic that clouded my thoughts, and I didn't think of my family until I passed the outer hedge wall one morning, scouting for a new spot to paint. A breeze from the south ruffled my hair, fresh and warm. Spring was now dawning on the mortal world. My family, glamored, cared for, safe, still had no idea where I was. The mortal world, it had moved on without me, as if I had never existed. A whisper of a miserable life, gone, unremembered by anyone whom I'd known or cared for. I didn't paint, nor did I go riding with Tamlin that day. Instead, I sat before a blank canvas, no colors at all in my mind. No one would remember me back home. I was as good as dead to them, and Tamlin had let me forget them. Maybe the paints had even been a distraction, a way to get me to stop complaining, to stop being a pain in his ass about wanting to see my family. Or maybe they were a distraction from whatever was happening with the Blight and Prithian. I'd stopped asking, just as the Suriel had ordered, like a stupid, useless, obedient human. It was an effort of stubborn will to make it through dinner. Tamlin and Lucian noticed my mood and kept conversation between themselves. It didn't do much for my growing rage, and when I had eaten my fill, I stalked into the moonlit garden and lost myself in its labyrinth of hedges and flower beds. I didn't care where I was going. After a while, I paused in the rose garden. The moonlight stained the red petals a deep purple and cast a silvery sheen on the white blooms.
My father had this garden planted for my mother,
Tamlin said from behind me. I didn't bother to face him. I dug my nails into my palms as he stopped by my side.
It was a mating present.
I stared at the flowers without seeing anything. The flowers I'd painted on the table at home were probably crumbling or gone by now. Nesta might have even scraped them off. My nails pricked the skin of my palms. Tamlin providing for them or no, glamoring their memories or no, I'd been erased from their lives, forgotten. I'd let him erase me. He'd offered me the paints and the space and time to practice. He'd shown me pools of starlight. He'd saved my life like some kind of feral knight in a legend, and I'd gulped it down like fairy wine. I was no better than those zealot children of the blessed. His mask was bronze in the darkness, and the emeralds glittered.
You seem upset.
I stalked to the nearest rose bush and ripped off a rose, my fingers tearing on the thorns. I ignored the pain, the warmth of the blood that trickled down. I could never paint it accurately, never render it the way those artists had in the gallery pieces. I would never be able to paint Elaine's little garden outside the cottage the way I remembered it, even if my family didn't remember me. He didn't reprimand me for taking one of his parents' roses, parents who were as absent as my own, but who had probably loved each other and loved him better than mine cared for me. A family that would have offered to go in his place had someone come to steal him away. My fingers stung and ached, but I still held on to the rose as I said, I don't know why I feel so tremendously ashamed of myself for leaving them. Why it feels so selfish and horrible to paint. I shouldn't feel that way, should I? I know I shouldn't, but I can't help it. The rose hung limply from my fingers. All those years, what I did for them, and they didn't try to stop you from taking me. There it was, the giant pain that cracked me in two if I thought about it too long. I don't know why I expected them to, why I believed that the Puka's illusion was real that night. I don't know why I bother still thinking about it, or still caring. He was silent long enough that I added, compared to you, to your borders and magic being weakened, I suppose my self-pity is absurd.
If it grieves you, he said, the words caressing my bones, then I don't think it's absurd at all.
Why? A flat question, and I chucked the rose into the bushes. He took my hands. His calloused fingers, strong and sturdy, were gentle, as he lifted my bleeding hand to his mouth and kissed my palm, as if that were answer enough. His lips were smooth against my skin, his breath warm, and my knees buckled as he lifted my other hand to his mouth and kissed it too. Kissed it carefully, in a way that made heat begin pounding in my core, between my legs. When he withdrew, my blood shone on his mouth. I glanced at my hands, which he still held, and found the wounds gone. I looked at his face again, at his gilded mask, the tanness of his skin, the red of his blood-covered lips, as he murmured, "Don't feel bad for one moment about doing what brings you joy." He stepped closer, releasing one of my hands to tuck the rose I'd plucked behind my ear. I didn't know how it had gotten into his hand or where the thorns had gone. I couldn't stop myself from pushing. Why? Why do any of this? He leaned in closer, so close that I had to tip my head back to see him. "Because your human joy fascinates me. The way you experience things in your lifespan, so wildly and deeply all at once, is entrancing. I'm drawn to it, even when I know I shouldn't be, even when I try not to be." Because I was human, and I would grow old, and I didn't let myself get that far as he came closer still. Slowly, as if giving me time to pull away, he brushed his lips against my cheek. Soft and warm and heartbreakingly gentle. It was hardly more than a caress before he straightened. I hadn't moved from the moment his mouth had met my skin. One day there will be answers for everything," he said, releasing my hand and stepping away. "But not until the time is right. Until it's safe." In the dark, his tone was enough to know that his eyes were flecked with bitterness. He left me, and I took a gasping breath, not realizing I'd been holding it. Not realizing that I craved his warmth, his nearness, until he was gone. Lingering mortification over what I'd admitted, what had changed between us, had me skulking out of the manor after breakfast, fleeing for the sanctuary of the woods for some fresh air, and to study the light and colors. I brought my bow and arrows, along with the jeweled hunting knife that Lucian had given me. Better to be armed than caught empty-handed. I crept through the trees and brush for no more than an hour before I felt a presence behind me, coming ever closer, sending the animals running for cover. I smiled to myself, and 20 minutes later, I settled in the crook of a towering elm and waited. Brush rustled. Hardly more than a breeze's passing, but I knew what to expect, knew the signs. A snap and roar of fury echoed across the lands, scattering the birds. When I climbed out of the tree and walked into the little clearing, I merely crossed my arms and looked up at the High Lord, dangling by his legs from the snare I'd laid. Even upside down, he smiled lazily at me as I approached. Cruel human. That's what you get for stalking someone. He chuckled, and I came close enough to dare stroke a finger along the silken golden hair dangling just above my face, admiring the many colors within it, the hues of yellow and brown and wheat. My heart thundered, and I knew he could probably hear it. But he leaned his head toward me, a silent invitation, and I ran my fingers through his hair, gently, carefully. He purred, the sound rumbling through my fingers, arms, legs, and core. I wondered how that sound would feel if he were fully pressed up against me, skin to skin. I stepped back. He curled upward in a smooth, powerful motion and swiped with a single claw at the creeping vine I'd used for rope. I took a breath to shout, but he flipped as he fell, landing smoothly on his feet. It would be impossible for me to ever forget what he was and what he was capable of. He took a step closer to me, the laughter still dancing on his face.
Feeling better today?
I mumbled some non-committal response.
Good,
he said, either ignoring or hiding his amusement.
But just in case, I wanted to give you this,
he added, pulling some papers from his tunic and extending them to me. I bit the inside of my cheek as I stared down at the 3 pieces of paper. It was a series of 5-lined poems. There were 5 of them altogether, and I began sweating at words I didn't recognize. It would take me an entire day just to figure out what these words meant.
Before you bolt or start yelling,
he said, coming around to peer over my shoulder. If I dared, I could have leaned back into his chest. His breath warmed my neck, the shell of my ear. He cleared his throat and read the first poem.
There once was a lady most beautiful, spirited, if a little unusual. Her friends were few, but how the men did queue, but to all she gave a refusal.
My brows rose so high I thought they'd touch my hairline, and I turned, blinking at him, our breath mingling as he finished the poem with a smile. Without waiting for my response, Tamlin took the papers and stepped a pace away to read the second poem, which wasn't nearly as polite as the first. By the time he read the third poem, my face was burning. Tamlin paused before he read the fourth, then handed me back the papers.
Final word in the 2nd and 4th line of each poem,
he said, jerking his chin toward the papers in my hands. Unusual. Q. I looked at the second poem. Slaying. Conflagration. These are... I started.
Your list of words was too interesting to pass up, and not good for love poems at all.
When I lifted my brow in silent inquiry, he said,
We had contests to see who could write the dirtiest limericks while I was living with my father's war band by the border. I don't particularly enjoy losing, so I took it upon myself to become good at them.
I didn't know how he'd remembered that long list I'd compiled. I didn't want to. Sensing I wasn't about to draw an arrow and shoot him, Tamlin took the papers and read the 5th poem, the dirtiest and foulest of them all. When he finished, I tipped my head back and howled, my laughter like sunshine shattering age-hardened ice. I was still smiling when we walked out of the park and toward the rolling hills, meandering back to the manor. You said, that night in the rose garden... I sucked on my teeth for a moment. You said that your father had it planted for your parents upon their mating, not wedding?
High Fae mostly marry,
he said, his golden skin flushing a bit.
But if they're blessed, they'll find their mate, their equal, their match in every way. High Fae wed without the mating bond, but if you find your mate, the bond is so deep that marriage is insignificant in comparison.
I didn't have the nerve to ask if fairies had ever had mating bonds with humans, but instead dared to say, Where are your parents? What happened to them? A muscle feathered in his jaw, and I regretted the question, if only for the pain that flickered in his eyes.
My father.
His claws gleamed at his knuckles, but didn't go out any farther. I definitely asked the wrong question.
My father was as bad as Lucian's. Worse. My 2 older brothers were just like him. They kept slaves, all of them. And my brothers. I was young when the treaty was forged, but I still remember what my brothers used to...
He trailed off.
It left a mark. Enough of a mark that when I saw you, your house, I wouldn't let myself be like them. Wouldn't bring harm to your family or you, or subject you to fairy whims. Slaves. There had been slaves here. I didn't want to know. Had never looked for traces of them, even 500 years later. I was still little better than chattel to most of his people, his world. That was why he'd offered the loophole, why he'd offered me the freedom to live wherever I wished in Prithian. "Thank you," I said. He shrugged, as if that would dismiss his kindness, the weight of the guilt that still bore down on him. "What about your mother?" Tamlin loosed a breath. My mother? She loved my father deeply. Too deeply, but they were mated, and even if she saw what a tyrant he was, she wouldn't say an ill word against him. I never expected, never wanted my father's title. My brothers would have never let me live to adolescence if they had suspected that I did. So the moment I was old enough, I joined my father's war band and trained so that I might someday serve my father, or whichever of my brothers inherited his title. He flexed his hands, as if imagining the claws beneath. I'd realized from an early age that fighting and killing were about the only things I was good at. "I doubt that," I said. He gave me a wry smile. "Oh, I can play a mean fiddle, but High Lords' sons don't become traveling minstrels. So I trained and fought for my father against whomever he told me to fight, and I would have been happy to leave the scheming to my brothers. But my power kept growing, and I couldn't hide it, not among our kind." He shook his head. Fortunately, or unfortunately, they were all killed by the High Lord of an enemy court. I was spared for whatever reason or cauldron granted luck. My mother I mourned. The others? A too tight shrug. My brothers would not have tried to save me from a fate like yours. I looked up at him. Such a brutal, harsh world, with families killing each other for power, for revenge, for spite and control. Perhaps his generosity, his kindness was a reaction to that. Perhaps he'd seen me and found it to be like gazing into a mirror of sorts. "I'm sorry about your mother," I said, and it was all I could offer. All he'd once been able to offer me. He gave me a small smile. "So that's how you became High Lord?" Most High Lords are trained from birth in manners and laws and court warfare. When the title fell to me, it was a rough transition. Many of my father's courtiers defected to other courts rather than have a warrior beast snarling at them. A half-wild beast, Nesta had once called me. It was an effort to not take his hand, to not reach out to him and tell him that I understood. But I just said, "Then they're idiots. You've kept these lands protected from the blight, when it seems that others haven't fared so well. They're idiots," I said again. But darkness flickered in Tamlin's eyes, and his shoulders seemed to curve inward ever so slightly. Before I could think about it, we cleared the little wood, a spread of hills and knolls laid out ahead. In the distance, there were masked fairies atop many of them, building what seemed to be unlit fires. "What are those?" I asked, halting. "They're setting up bonfires for Cullen Mai. It's in 2 days." "For what?" "Fire Night." I shook my head. "We don't celebrate holidays in the human realm. Not after your people left. In some places it's forbidden. We don't even remember the names of your gods. What does Kala Fire Night celebrate?" He rubbed his neck. "It's just a spring ceremony. We light bonfires and The magic that we create helps regenerate the land for the year ahead.
How do you create the magic?
There's a ritual, but it's very fairy.
He clenched his jaw and continued walking, away from the unlit fires.
You might see more fairies around than usual. Fairies from this court and from other territories who are free to wander across the borders that night.
I thought the blight had scared many of them away.
It has, but there will be a number of them. Just stay away from them all. You'll be safe in the house, but if you run into one before we light the fires at sundown in 2 days, ignore them.
And I'm not invited to your ceremony?
No, you're not.
He clenched and loosened his fingers again and again, as if trying to keep the claws contained. Though I tried to ignore it, my chest caved a bit. We walked back in the sort of tense silence we hadn't endured in weeks. Tamlin went rigid the moment we entered the gardens. Not from me or our awkward conversation. It was quiet with that horrible stillness that usually meant one of the nastier fairies was around. Tamlin bared his teeth in a low snarl.
Stay hidden, and no matter what you overhear, don't come out.
Then he was gone. Alone, I looked to either side of the gravel path like some gawking idiot. If there was indeed something here, I'd be caught in the open. Perhaps it was shameful not to go to his aid, but he was a high lord. I would just get in the way. I had just ducked behind a hedge when I heard Tamlin and Lucian approaching. I silently swore and froze. Maybe I could sneak across the fields to the stables. If there was something amiss, the stables not only had shelter, but also a horse for me to flee on. I was about to make for the high grasses mere steps beyond the edge of the gardens when Tamlin's snarl rippled through the air on the other side of the hedge. I turned, just enough to spy them through the dense leaves.
Stay hidden, he'd said.
If I moved now, I would surely be noticed.
I know what day it is,
Tamlin said, but not to Lucian. Rather, the two of them faced nothing. Someone who wasn't there. Someone invisible. I would have thought they were playing a prank on me had I not heard a low, disembodied voice reply.
Your continued behavior is garnering a lot of interest at court,
the voice said, deep and sibilant. I shivered despite the warmth of the day.
She has begun wondering why you haven't given up yet, and why 4 Naga wound up dead not too long ago.
Tamlin's not like the other fools, Lucian snapped, his shoulders pushed back to raise himself to his full height, more warrior-like than I'd yet seen him. No wonder he had all those weapons in his room.
If she expected bowed heads, then she's more of an idiot than I thought.
The voice hissed, and my blood went cold at the noise.
Speak you so ill of she who holds your fate in her hands? With one word she could destroy this pathetic estate. She wasn't pleased when she heard of you dispatching your warriors.
The voice now seemed turned toward Tamlin.
But as nothing has come of it, she has chosen to ignore it.
There was a deep-throated growl from the High Lord, but his words were calm as he said,
Tell her I'm getting sick of cleaning up the trash she dumps on my borders.
The voice chuckled, the sound like sand shifting.
She sets them loose as gifts, and reminders of what will happen if she catches you trying to break the terms of...
He's not, Lucian snarled.
Now get out! We have enough of your ilk swarming on the borders. We don't need you defiling our home, too. For that matter, stay the hell out of the cave. It's not some common road for filth like you to travel through as they please.
Tamlin loosed a growl of agreement. The invisible thing laughed again, Such a horrible, vicious sound.
"Though you have a heart of stone, Tamlin," it said, and Tamlin went rigid. "You certainly keep a host of fear inside it."
The voice sank into a croon.
"Don't worry, High Lord."
It spat the title like a joke.
"All will be right as rain soon enough." "Burn in hell,"
Lucian replied for Tamlin, and the thing laughed again before a flap of leathery wings boomed, a foul wind bit my face, and everything went silent. They breathed deeply after another moment. I closed my eyes, needing a steadying breath as well, but massive hands clamped onto my shoulders, and I yelped.
"It's gone,"
Tamlin said, releasing me. It was all I could do not to sag against the hedges.
"What did you hear?"
Lucian demanded, coming around the corner and crossing his arms. I shifted my gaze to Tamlin's face, but found it to be so white with anger at that thing, that I had to look again at Lucian. Nothing I understood, I said, and meant it. None of it made any sense. I couldn't stop shaking. Something about that voice had ripped away the warmth from me. What was that? Tamlin began pacing, the gravel churning beneath his boots.
"There are certain fairies in Prithian who inspire the legends that you humans are so afraid of. Some, like that one, are myth-given flesh."
Inside that hissing voice, I'd heard the screaming of human victims, the pleading of young maidens whose chests had been split open on sacrificial altars. Mentions of court, seemingly different from Tamlin's own. Was that she the one who had killed Tamlin's parents? A high lady, perhaps, in lieu of a lord? Considering how ruthless the High Fae were to their families, they had to be nightmarish to their enemies. And if there was to be warring between the courts, if the blight had left Tamlin already weakened...
"If the Ator saw her," Lucian said, glancing around.
"It didn't," Tamlin said.
"Are you certain it didn't?"
Tamlin growled over his shoulder, then looked at me, his face still pale with fury, lips tight.
"I'll see you at dinner."
Understanding a dismissal and craving the locked door of my bedroom, I trudged back to the house, contemplating who this she was to make Tamlin and Lucian so nervous and to command that thing as her messenger. The spring breeze whispered that I didn't want to know. Chapter 20. After a tense dinner during which Tamlin hardly spoke to Lucian or me, I lit all the candles in my room to chase away the shadows. I didn't go outside the following day, and when I sat down to paint, what emerged on my canvas was a tall, skeletally thin gray creature with bat ears and giant membranous wings. Its snout was open in a roar, revealing row after row of fangs as it leaped into flight. As I painted it, I could have sworn that I could smell breath that reeked of carrion, that the air beneath its wings whispered promises of death. The finished product was chilling enough that I had to set aside the painting in the back of the room and go try to persuade Alice to let me help with the fire night food preparations in the kitchen. Anything to avoid going into the garden, where the Ator might appear. The day of fire night, Kalan Mai, Tamlin had called it, dawned, and I didn't see Tamlin or Lucian all day. As the afternoon shifted into dusk, I found myself again at the main crossroads of the house. None of the bird-faced servants were to be found. The kitchen was empty of staff and the food they'd been preparing for 2 days. The sound of drums issued. The drum beats came from far away. Beyond the garden, past the game park, into the forest that lay beyond. They were deep, probing. A single beat echoed by 2 responding calls, summoning. I stood by the doors to the garden, staring out over the property as the sky became awash in hues of orange and red. In the distance, upon the sloping hills that led into the woods, a few fires flickered, plumes of dark smoke marring the ruby sky, the unlit bonfires I'd spotted 2 days ago. Not invited, I reminded myself. Not invited to whatever party had all the kitchen fairies tittering and laughing among one another. The drums turned faster, louder. Though I'd grown accustomed to the smell of magic, my nose pricked with the rising tang of metal, stronger than I'd yet sensed it. I took a step forward, then halted on the threshold. I should go back in. Behind me, the setting sun stained the black and white tiles of the hall floor a shimmering shade of tangerine, and my long shadow seemed to pulse to the beat of the drums. Even the garden, usually buzzing with the orchestra of its denizens, had quieted to hear the drums. There was a string tied to my gut that pulled me toward those hills, commanding me to go, to hear the fairy drums. I might have done just that had Tamlin not appeared from down the hall. He was shirtless, with only the baldric across his muscled chest. The pommel of his sword glinted golden in the dying sunlight, and the feathered tops of arrows were stained red as they poked above his broad shoulder. I stared at him, and he watched me back. The warrior incarnate. "Where are you going?" I managed to get out. "It's Callum Mai," he said flatly. "I have to go." He jerked his chin to the fires and drums. "To do what?" I asked, glancing at the bow in his hand. My heart echoed the drums outside, building into a wilder beat. His green eyes were shadowed beneath the gilded mask. "As a High Lord, I have to partake in the great rite." "What's the great—" "Go to your chamber," he snarled, and glanced toward the fires. "Lock your doors. Set up a snare, whatever you do." "Why?" I demanded. The Ator's voice snaked through my memory. Tamlin had said something about a very fairy ritual. What the hell was it? From the weapons, it had to be brutal and violent, especially if Tamlin's beast form wasn't weapon enough. "Just do it." His canines began to lengthen. My heart leaped into a gallop. "Don't come out until morning." Stronger, faster the drums beat, and the muscles in Tamlin's neck quivered, as if standing still were somehow painful to him. "Are you going into battle?" I whispered, and he let out a breathy laugh. He lifted a hand as if to touch my arm, but he lowered it before his fingers could graze the fabric of my tunic. "Stay in your chamber, Feyre." "But please." Before I could ask him to reconsider bringing me along, he took off running. The muscles in his back shifted as he leaped down the short flight of stairs and bounded into the garden, as spry and swift as a stag. Within seconds, he was gone. I did as he commanded, though I soon realized that I'd locked myself in my room without having eaten dinner. And with the incessant drumming and dozens of bonfires that popped up along the far hills, I couldn't stop pacing up and down my room, gazing out toward the fires burning in the distance. "Stay in your chamber." But a wild, wicked voice weaving in between the drum beats whispered otherwise. "Go," that voice said, tugging at me. "Go see." By 10 o'clock, I could no longer stand it. I followed the drums. The stables were empty, but Tamlin had taught me how to ride bareback these past few weeks, and my white mare was soon trotting along. I didn't need to guide her. She too followed the lure of the drums and ascended the first of the foothills. Smoke and magic hung thick in the air. Concealed in my hooded cloak, I gaped as I approached the first giant bonfire atop the hill. There were hundreds of high fae milling about, but I couldn't discern any of their features beyond the various masks they wore. Where had they come from? Where did they live, if they belonged to the spring court but did not dwell in the manor? When I tried to focus on a specific feature of their faces, it became a blur of color. They were more solid when I viewed them from the side of my vision, but if I turned to face them, I was met with shadows and swirling colors. It was magic. Some kind of glamour put on me, meant to prevent my viewing them properly, just as my family had been glamored. I would have been furious, would have considered going back to the manor had the drums not echoed through my bones and that wild voice not beckoned to me. I dismounted my mare, but kept close to her as I made my way through the crowd, my telltale human features hidden in the shadow of my hood. I prayed that the smoke and countless scents of various high fae and fairies were enough to cover my human smell, but I checked to ensure that my 2 knives were still at my sides anyway as I moved deeper into the celebration. Though a cluster of drummers played on one side of the fire, the fairies flocked to a trench between 2 nearby hills. I left my horse tied to a solitary sycamore crowning a knoll and followed them, savoring the pulsing beat of the drums as it resonated through the earth and into the soles of my feet. No one looked twice in my direction. I almost slid down the steep bank as I entered the hollow. At one end, a cave mouth opened into a soft hillside. Its exterior had been adorned with flowers and branches and leaves, and I could make out the beginnings of a pelt-covered floor just past the cave mouth. What lay inside was hidden from view as the chamber veered away from the entrance, but firelight danced upon the walls. Whatever was occurring inside the cave, or whatever was about to happen, was the focus of the shadowy fairies as they lined either side of a long path leading to it. The path wended between the trenches among the hills, and the high fae swayed in place, moving to the rhythm of the drumming, whose beats sounded in my stomach. I watched them sway, then shifted on my feet. I'd been banned from this? I scanned the firelit area, trying to peer through the veil of night and smoke. I found nothing of interest, and none of the masked fairies paid me any heed. They remained along the path, more and more of them coming each minute. Something was definitely going to happen, whatever this great rite was. I made my way back up the hillside and stood along the edge of a bonfire near the trees, watching the fairies. I was about to work up the courage to ask a lesser fairy who passed by, a bird-masked servant like Alice, what sort of ritual was going to happen when someone grasped my arm and whirled me around. I blinked at the 3 strangers, dumbfounded as I beheld their sharp-featured faces, free of masks. They looked like high fae, but there was something slightly different about them, something taller and leaner than Tamlin or Lucian, something crueler in their pitch-black, depthless eyes. Fairies, then. The one grasping my arm smiled down at me, revealing slightly pointed teeth. "Human woman," he murmured, running an eye over me. "We've not seen one of you for a while." I tried yanking my arm back, but he held my elbow firm. "What do you want?" I demanded, keeping my voice steady and cold. The 2 fairies who flanked him smiled at me, and one grabbed my other arm, just as I went for my knife. Just some fire night fun, one of them said, reaching out a pale, too long hand to brush back a lock of my hair. I twisted my head away and tried to step out of his touch, but he held firm. None of the fairies near the bonfire reacted. No one bothered to look. If I cried for help, would someone answer? Would Tamlin answer? I couldn't be that lucky again. I'd probably used up my allotted portion of luck with the Naga. I yanked my arms in earnest. Their grip tightened until it hurt, and they kept my hands well away from my knives. The three of them stepped closer, sealing me off from the others. I glanced around, looking for any ally. There were more non-masked fairies here now. The three fairies chuckled, a low hissing noise that ran along my body. I hadn't realized how far I stood from everyone else, how close I'd come to the forest's edge. "Leave me alone," I said, louder and angrier than I'd expected, given the shaking that was starting in my knees. "Bold statement from a human on Calumni," said the one holding my left arm. The fires didn't reflect in his eyes. It was as if they gobbled up the light. I thought of the Naga, whose horrible exteriors matched their rotten hearts. Somehow, these beautiful ethereal fairies were far worse. "Once the rites performed, we'll have some fun, won't we? A treat. Such a treat to find a human woman here." I bared my teeth at him. "Get your hands off me," I said, loud enough for anyone to hear. One of them ran a hand down my side, its bony fingers digging into my ribs, my hips. I jerked back, only to slam into the third one, who wove his long fingers through my hair and pressed close. No one looked. No one noticed. "Stop it," I said, but the words came out in a strangled gasp as they began herding me toward the line of trees, toward the darkness. I pushed and thrashed against them. They only hissed. One of them shoved me and I staggered, falling out of their grasp. The ground welled up beneath me and I reached for my knives, but sturdy hands grasped me under the shoulders before I could draw them or hit the grass. They were strong hands, warm and broad. Not at all like the prodding, bony fingers of the three fairies who went utterly still as whoever caught me gently set me upright.
"There you are. I've been looking for you," said a deep, sensual male voice I'd never heard. But I kept my eyes on the three fairies, bracing myself for flight as the male behind me stepped to my side and slipped a casual arm around my shoulder. The three lesser fairies paled, their dark eyes wide. "Thank you for finding her for me," my savior said to them, smooth and polished. "Enjoy the rite." There was enough of a bite beneath his last words that the fairies stiffened. Without further comment, they scuttled back to the bonfires. I stepped out of the shelter of my savior's arm and turned to thank him. Standing before me was the most beautiful man I'd ever seen.
All right. Aw, shit. She said, the most beautiful man she's ever done seen. Is it Tamlin? Is it Lucian? Is it someone else? Well, we're going to have to find out next week on Thursday. I know. Cliffhanger in you, huh? All right. Well, hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Hope you guys enjoyed chapters 19 and 20. And I will see you guys on Friday if you're on Patreon. Sunday if you guys are waiting for the free shows. Love you guys all. Thank you for all the support. And peace.